Farmer kicked out of a dealership for not looking rich. They humiliated him for wearing a hat and boots, but he came back in a helicopter, bought 2 luxury cars, and proved that dignity isn't measured by clothes, but by roots. They called him a peasant. Now they call him the gentleman in the straw hat. Welcome to the channel. Before we start, please like and subscribe so we can keep creating stories like this one. The midday sun beat down mercilessly on Dallas. The heat reflected off the asphalt of Commerce Avenue, while Mr. Robert Miller adjusted his straw hat, worn by the sun and years. His rough, weathered hands revealed decades of hard work in the fields of Texas. At 60 years old, Mr. Miller knew the value of silent effort, the kind that doesn't seek applause or recognition. Before him rose the imposing glass facade of Executive Autos Richardson, the most prestigious dealership in the city. The building seemed to challenge the sky with its modernity, an absolute contrast to Mr. Miller's humble appearance, who wore worn jeans, a simple cotton shirt, and his inseparable dusty boots. In his shirt pocket, a folded piece of paper held the name of a specific model he had seen in a magazine. It wasn't a whim. It was a gift he wanted to give his granddaughter, Sarah, who had just graduated with honors as an agricultural engineer. A source of pride for the Miller family. As he crossed the automatic doors, the air conditioning hit his face like an icy slap. The interior was a sanctuary of luxury. Italian marble floors, strategically placed lighting to highlight the curves of the displayed vehicles, and ambient music that whispered exclusivity. The salespeople, young men in impeccable suits, moved like elegant sharks among potential customers. Mr. Miller advanced with a firm step toward the main counter. He was no stranger to the sidelong glances he received. He could feel how they classified him by his appearance, how they labeled him as an intruder in that temple of opulence. "Good afternoon," he greeted with a serene voice to a salesman named Jason Reed, as indicated by his identification badge. The young man, about 30, with perfectly combed hair and a rehearsed smile, barely looked up from his tablet. "How can I help you?" he replied in a tone that oscillated between professional courtesy and poorly disguised disdain. "I'm interested in seeing the Richardson Diamond model," said Mr. Miller, taking the folded paper from his pocket. The salesman raised an eyebrow and looked the farmer up and down. A mocking smile appeared on his face as he exchanged knowing looks with another nearby salesman. "The Richardson Diamond?" he repeated with barely contained mockery. "Sir, that's our most exclusive model. It costs more than many houses in the most privileged neighborhoods of the city." Mr. Miller nodded calmly. "I know, that's why I'm here." Jason let out a chuckle and approached his colleague, whispering something that provoked disguised laughter. Then he returned to Mr. Miller with a condescending smile. "Look, sir, why don't I show you something more accessible? We have used models that might better suit your situation." "I just want to see the diamond, please," insisted Mr. Miller without losing his composure. The salesman sighed impatiently. "I'm sorry, but that model isn't on display. It's only available by special order and requires a significant deposit." He paused and added sarcastically, "And how do you plan to pay for it? With corn cobs?" The barely contained laughter of the other salesman resonated in the space. Mr. Miller remained impassive, his intact dignity reflected in his dark eyes. Without saying another word, he nodded slightly, gave thanks, and headed for the exit. The sound of his boots on the marble marked a constant rhythm, like his character. No reproach, no gesture of indignation, only silence and dignity. As he left, an elegant woman who had witnessed the scene from a corner observed him intently. It was Emily Harrison, marketing director of an important agribusiness company, who had come to the dealership to finalize the purchase of a corporate fleet. Her eyes, as sharp as a hawk's, hadn't missed a detail of the exchange. That same afternoon, in the tranquility of his ranch morning light on the outskirts of Austin, Mr. Miller contemplated the sunset from his porch. The property, though extensive and prosperous, maintained an air of simplicity that reflected the character of its owner. In the distance, the avocado fields and experimental organic crop plantations extended as far as the eye could see. "What happened, Grandpa? Could you see the car?" asked Sarah, approaching with 2 cups of homemade coffee. Mr. Miller smiled serenely. "Tomorrow, sweetheart. Tomorrow we'll see it." In his study, he picked up the phone and dialed a number he rarely used. "Frank, prepare. The documents I mentioned and the helicopter for tomorrow at 10. We're going to make a visit to the city." On the other end of the line, his accountant and friend of decades confirmed the instructions without needing further explanation. He knew Mr. Miller and his way of acting well. Meanwhile, at the dealership, the General Manager Thomas Richardson was reviewing the day's figures in his office when he received an unexpected call. "Mr. Richardson, this is Emily Harrison. I need to talk to you about a very unfortunate incident I witnessed today at your establishment." Night fell over Dallas, and with it, the first pieces of a chessboard began to move. Mr. Miller, in the tranquility of his ranch, contemplated the stars while thinking about the lessons that life had taught him. He wasn't a man of revenge, but of principles, and tomorrow those principles would speak for themselves. The next morning dawned clear and bright. At 10 o'clock sharp, the sound of helicopter blades broke the usual tranquility of Commerce Avenue. On the helipad of the business building adjacent to the Richardson dealership, a Bell 429 with discreet but unmistakable luxury landed. Employees from nearby offices looked out the windows, intrigued by the unexpected visit. Two men descended from the helicopter. The first, Frank Thompson, a man of about 50, impeccably dressed in a suit carrying an Italian leather briefcase. The second, Mr. Miller, who had changed his worn jeans for beige linen pants and a finely made white guayabera shirt. His straw hat, however, remained the same, like a symbol of his immutable essence. Meanwhile, at the dealership, the atmosphere was tense. Thomas Richardson, the general manager, had called an emergency meeting with all the sales staff. His face reflected concern and anger in equal parts. "Mrs. Harrison, one of our most important clients, informed me yesterday about an unacceptable incident," he began, pacing in front of his employees. "So apparently one of you treated a potential customer with contempt because of his appearance." The salespeople exchanged nervous glances. Jason Reed, who had been the protagonist of the unfortunate episode, kept his eyes fixed on the floor. "I want to remind you that this house does not discriminate. Every person who crosses those doors deserves respect, regardless of their appearance or social condition," continued Richardson, increasingly agitated. "Also, I've just been informed that Mr. Robert Miller." The main doors opened at that moment. The staff turned in unison to see Mr. Miller enter, accompanied by Frank. The presence of the farmer, now with an air of serene authority, filled the space. Jason paled upon recognizing him. Thomas Richardson hurried forward, extending his hand with a nervous smile. "Mr. Miller, it's an honor to have you here. I apologize 1,000 times for what happened yesterday. I assure you that at Executive Autos Richardson, we value all our customers and—" Mr. Miller slightly raised his hand, interrupting the torrent of apologies. "Good morning, Mr. Richardson," he said in a quiet but firm voice. "I don't come for explanations but for business. I would like to see the diamond model, please." The manager nodded energetically, casting a severe look at Jason, who was trying to blend in with the furniture. "Of course, Mr. Miller. Allow me to attend to you personally." "If you don't mind," interjected Mr. Miller, "I would prefer to be assisted by that young lady over there." He pointed to a young saleswoman observing the scene from a corner. The young woman, Jessica Wells, advanced surprised but professional. "Good morning, sir. I'm Jessica. It will be my pleasure to show you our diamond model." During the next hour, Jessica presented the vehicle's features in detail. Mr. Miller listened attentively, asking precise questions that revealed a surprising knowledge about mechanics and automotive design. Frank, meanwhile, prepared documents and made discreet calls. Finally, Mr. Miller nodded, satisfied. "I'll take 2 units," he announced naturally. "One in sapphire blue for my granddaughter Sarah, and another in black for the foundation." A stunned silence took over the place. 2 Richardson diamonds represented an astronomical sum. Jessica, maintaining her professionalism, nodded and began to process the documentation. Frank approached and spread out on the counter the bank certificates and documents necessary for the transaction. "Full payment, no financing," specified Frank. "We also require specific invoicing for the Seeds of Tomorrow Foundation." The name of the foundation provoked murmurs among the staff. The Seeds of Tomorrow Foundation was known for its revolutionary work in developing sustainable agricultural techniques and educational programs for rural communities throughout Texas. Few knew that Mr. Miller was its founder and main benefactor. While the transaction was being finalized, Emily Harrison entered the dealership. Upon seeing Mr. Miller, she approached with a warm smile. "Mr. Miller, how nice to see you here. It seems that today they are attending to you as you deserve." The farmer greeted her with affection, introducing her to Frank and Jessica. "Emily is a great ally in our fair trade projects," he explained. To Jessica, who was beginning to understand the magnitude of who she had in front of her. Jason Reed observed the scene from his desk, consumed by shame. When he finally gathered the courage to approach and try to apologize, Thomas Richardson intercepted him. "Pack your things, Jason. You're fired." The young salesman nodded, accepting the consequences of his actions with his head down. Mr. Miller, who had heard the exchange, turned to Richardson. "It's not necessary to go to that extreme, Mr. Richardson," he said to everyone's surprise. "Sometimes second chances are necessary for growth." Richardson hesitated, but finally nodded, respecting the suggestion. "As you wish, Mr. Miller, but I assure you we will take measures to ensure situations like this don't happen again." The transaction was completed without setbacks. Mr. Miller received the keys to both vehicles with the same serenity with which he had endured the contempt the day before. There was no trace of arrogance or triumphalism in him. As they left the dealership, a small crowd had gathered on the sidewalk. The helicopter and luxury cars had attracted curious looks. Among the people, a young reporter from the local newspaper recognized Mr. Miller and began to take photographs discreetly. "Shall we go, Mr. Miller?" asked Frank, pointing to the helicopter. "You take one of the cars to the foundation, please. I'll drive the other to the ranch. I want to surprise Sarah personally." As Mr. Miller drove away at the wheel of the gleaming blue Diamond, Emily approached Jessica, who was still impacted by what had happened. "Do you know who Mr. Robert Miller really is?" asked Emily. Jessica shook her head. "He's a silent revolutionary," explained Emily. "He has transformed sustainable agriculture in Texas without making noise, creating jobs for hundreds of families and developing technologies that are changing the way we produce food. And it all started with a small plot he inherited from his father." On the way to Austin, Mr. Miller drove with the window down, feeling the wind on his face. He wasn't thinking about the cars or the dealership or the arrogant salesman. His mind was on the new experimental crops, on the families who depended on the next harvest, on the students sponsored by his foundation. For him, what had happened had been nothing more than a reminder. A person's worth is never in their appearance but in their actions. And as the Texas sun shone on the hood of the car, a story began to take shape on social media, a story that would soon capture the imagination of the entire country. 3 weeks after the incident at the dealership, the story of Mr. Robert Miller had become a national phenomenon. The video, discreetly recorded by a customer, went viral on social media, accumulating millions of views. The media dubbed the story "The Gentleman in the Straw Hat," and soon the image of the humble farmer became a symbol of dignity in the face of discrimination. At the Morning Light Ranch, Sarah watched in amazement how her grandfather handled the sudden media attention, with the same calm with which he faced droughts or unexpected frosts in his crops. "Grandpa, there's another interview." "A request, this time from an international channel," said Sarah, entering the study where Mr. Miller was reviewing plans for a new irrigation system. The old man smiled kindly and gently shook his head. "Tell them I appreciate their interest, but my work is in the fields, not in front of cameras." Sarah sat across from him, curious about her grandfather's serenity. "Doesn't it bother you that it went public, that everyone is talking about you and what happened?" Mr. Miller put down the plans and looked at his granddaughter with wise eyes. "What would worry me, Sarah, is if they talked about the incident and not what it means. It's not about me or a discourteous salesman. It's about how we continue to judge by appearances in the 21st century. In Dallas, meanwhile, the Richardson dealership was experiencing significant changes. Thomas Richardson had implemented an ambitious training program in inclusive care and dignified treatment. Jason Reed, who surprisingly had not been fired thanks to Mr. Miller's intervention, had become the most enthusiastic promoter of these new policies. "What I learned from Mr. Miller," Jason explained to his colleagues during a training session, "is that true wealth isn't measured by what one has, but by how one treats others." Jessica Wells, the saleswoman who had attended to Mr. Miller on his second visit, had been promoted to sales manager, implementing a new approach that prioritized customer experience above quick sales. But the consequences of the episode went far beyond the dealership. The story had opened a national debate on classism rooted in American society. Journalists, academics, and public figures analyzed how appearances continued to determine how people were treated in various settings. One particularly hot afternoon, Mr. Miller received an unexpected visit at his ranch. William Carson, CEO of Northern Agro-Industrial Corporation, arrived in a convoy of luxury vehicles. The businessman, known for his aggressive land acquisition tactics, requested a private meeting. "Mr. Miller, I'll get straight to the point," said Carson as they toured the experimental fields. "I want to buy Morning Light and the adjacent lands. I have a large-scale agro-industrial project that will revolutionize production in the region. I'm offering you triple the market value." Mr. Miller calmly observed how a group of young agronomy students worked in a sector of experimental crops. They were scholarship recipients from his foundation, most from rural communities. "Do you see those young people, Mr. Carson? Each one represents a family, a community. What we do here isn't just about producing food, but about cultivating the future." The businessman insisted, increasing his offer, but Mr. Miller was firm in his refusal. It wasn't a matter of money, it was a matter of purpose. That night, during the family dinner, Mr. Miller shared the news with Sarah and with Jake, his younger grandson who was studying business administration at the university. "You rejected an offer that big, Grandpa?" asked Jake, surprised. "Money comes and goes, son. What remains is the impact we leave on others." Days later, during the graduation ceremony of the new generation of scholarship recipients from the Seeds of Tomorrow Foundation, Mr. Miller received news that would change the course of his life. The National Council for Sustainable Rural Development had nominated him to preside over it, following a proposal backed by hundreds of small and medium producers from across the country. The ceremony, held in the gardens of the ranch, brought together families from all over Texas. Among the attendees were Emily Harrison, who had consolidated a strategic alliance with the foundation, Jessica and Jason from the Richardson dealership, who had developed a genuine friendship with Mr. Miller, and to everyone's surprise, William Carson himself, who seemed to be observing the event with new eyes. When Mr. Miller took the podium to deliver the diplomas, a spontaneous ovation greeted him. Visibly moved, the old man adjusted his inseparable straw hat before speaking. "Each of you represents the best of our country," he said to the graduates. "It's not your degrees that will change our nation, but your ability to treat each person with dignity, regardless of their origin or appearance." Among the attendees, a reporter from a major national newspaper was taking discreet notes. She had come seeking an exclusive interview, but found something more valuable: the true dimension of Mr. Miller's silent work. Beyond the viral gentleman in the straw hat, she discovered decades of constant work, transforming the lives of entire communities. At the end of the ceremony, William Carson approached Mr. Miller. "I've been thinking about our conversation. Mr. Miller," the businessman admitted, "perhaps there are ways we can collaborate instead of compete. My capital and your vision could do a lot of good together." Mr. Miller smiled, recognizing a genuine change in the businessman's attitude. "The doors are always open for those who come with respect, Mr. Carson. We can talk about it next week." As the guests dispersed under the starry Austin sky, Sarah found her grandfather contemplating the fields from his favorite spot on the porch. "What are you thinking about, Grandpa?" she asked, sitting beside him. "That life has curious ways of teaching us," he replied, with a serene smile. "Sometimes we need to be reminded of what we already know, that every human being deserves respect, regardless of their appearance or position." "Do you regret having gone back to the dealership that day, having shown who you really were?" Mr. Miller reflected for a moment before answering. "I didn't go to show who I was, Sarah. I went to remind them who we all are, people who deserve to be treated with dignity. The rest, all this commotion, is just a mirror where society is seeing itself." The next day, the report about Mr. Miller occupied the front page of the most important newspaper in the country. It didn't talk about the viral incident, but about his decades of work in sustainable rural development, in the education of young farmers, in dignifying agricultural work. The headline read, "Robert Miller, the true treasure is in the land we cultivate and the people we respect." Weeks later, in a rural school funded by the Seeds of Tomorrow Foundation, a group of children surrounded Mr. Miller as he inaugurated a community library. A little girl with braids and bright eyes raised her hand. "Mr. Miller, is it true that you're very rich and have many elegant cars?" she asked, with the innocence typical of her age. The old man stooped to her level and, with a warm smile, replied, "True wealth, little one, is in being able to look any person in the eye without feeling that you're worth more or less than them. That's worth more than all the cars in the world." As the evening fell over the Texas fields, the figure of Mr. Miller under his straw hat was silhouetted against the horizon. His story had begun as an isolated incident of discrimination, but had transformed into a powerful reminder that dignity isn't bought or sold. It's exercised every day, in every interaction, with every person we cross in our path. And so, with the same humility with which he had faced both contempt and admiration, Robert Miller continued planting the seeds of change in his beloved country, demonstrating that sometimes the deepest revolutions are also the most silent. The story of Robert Miller transcended borders. What began as a simple incident in a car dealership became a national movement for respect and dignity. His legacy was not just the Seeds of Tomorrow Foundation or the agricultural innovations that revolutionized the American countryside, but something much more valuable. The lesson that true greatness lies in treating everyone with respect, regardless of their appearance. His straw hat, initially a symbol of mockery for some, transformed into an emblem of wisdom and dignity. And although Mr. Miller remained the same simple man who walked among his crops at dawn, America no longer saw him the same way. He had reminded an entire country that sometimes the most extraordinary people are those who don't need to prove it. At the Richardson dealership, a framed photograph of Mr. Miller now presided over the entrance with a simple phrase underneath: "Respect isn't bought or sold, it's cultivated." Dear listeners, we hope that the story of Robert Miller has touched your heart and reminded you that dignity is everyone's right, regardless of our appearance or social condition. To continue this journey of stories that inspire and transform, we've prepared a special collection about extraordinary characters from our American land. Find it by clicking on your left. If this story of humility, respect, and true greatness resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like this episode. Each week we bring stories that explore the cultural and human richness of our country, stories that remind us who we are and who we can become. Have you ever lived through or witnessed a situation similar to Mr. Miller's? How did you react? We invite you to share your experiences in the comments, because each personal story is one more seed for the change we all want to see. Until our next meeting,